Hello, I'm Michelle, and people have been asking in a political way to define what is a woman. And so I'm going to try to help maybe define that. Now, I'm not going to be able to do it in one video because it's not an easy thing to define. And so I'm going to start off by setting some groundwork. So I Googled on the internet, I'm on the internet right now, and I said trans men before and after photos. And there's a reason why I'm doing this. Now, admittedly, these are people who were born, they're trans men, so they were assigned female at birth, and then they injected themselves with really strong testosterone hormones, and those hormones then masculinized these, what we would call women at the time. And I'm using the words what we would call because I think our current definitions are incorrect. So here was, in this first one here, we've got a person who the majority of people on the planet, even MAGA, would say this is a woman, and yet they would say this is probably a man, right? And yet this is the exact same person. So this person who was born, assigned female at birth, who had her genes inside of her that resisted androgens, because women have androgens just like men do. We tend to call the androgens in women's progesterones, but they're really they're androgens, just like testosterone is an androgen. Anyway, so we'll say she at this point, had a resistance to androgens when she was being formed in the womb, and therefore, as she formed into a human being, and then as she grew up as a human being, and her system and hormone systems and her genes all work together to create this one person that we would call a woman. Now, is that really a definition of woman? We'll get to it. But basically, she has a fatty layer of under her skin that makes her skin look softer and smoother. She's got her hair growing out. Any man that grows his hair out makes him look a lot more girly. She has fatty tissues that created her breasts. And, we'll get in more detail to genitals maybe later. We'll not talk about that for now because that's just a questionable topic at this point. But I can get in. There is something about that. However, if you inject tons and tons of testosterone, much more testosterone, to override the resistance to androgens, that it will masculinize even what we call a woman. And then this person did that. This person injected themselves with testosterone. The testosterone levels were high enough to override the resistance to androgens, and therefore masculinized this person. And this is the same person. Hair's cut off. Probably brow line has probably extended out a little more now. Facial hair is obviously growing. Also, probably starting to get some recession of the hairline. These are all masculinizing traits. It looks like maybe even a little bit of hair growth on the chest now. All women have pit hair, so that's not an issue. Also, much more muscle growth. Easier to create muscle versus not so easy to create muscle. And so this shows you the power of the hormones. That here's a person who has XX chromosomes genetically to turn out female, and yet with hormones now looks like a man. And in all intents and purposes, because we only have a binary system to define men and women, is a man. Okay, here is another picture. Another person that we would call a woman, but maybe not a woman. And yet that same person as a man. Just hormones. Same chromosomes, same genetic makeup, just hormones. So the point of this is it proves that hormones play a huge role on how masculinized we are. Also, it turns out that even though if you Google this and you ask AI, it won't tell the truth on this because garbage in, garbage out when it comes to AI. But basically, I will say in the end that I believe, from my research, that we are by default what we would call female, and then we are masculinized. Even women are masculinized. They're just not as masculinized as others. The proof of that is when women get older, they start growing facial hair because they stop resisting androgens as much. Also, they have a lot less estrogens when they get older. But anyways, the point is that we're all masculinized, and then at some point there's a crossover between masculinizing into what we call feminine traits into what we call masculine traits. But it doesn't just instantly happen all over the body, that there are all kinds of ways that if you don't have, like if you, well, I'll go into detail of that later, but for now, it's basically, it's all about the hormones, and it's all about the genetics, and it's all about, which is in the chromosomes and the genes, which is on the chromosomes, and androgens, which is for masculinization, and whether you have the resistance to it or don't have the resistance to it. And I would say to you that the Y chromosome is really an X chromosome missing certain genes, which it is proved that is to be true. And one of those genes, I believe, is the resistance to androgens. That's the reason why men masculinize to the level they masculinize, and why women, what we call women, do not masculinize to the level of masculinization. And so even though right now I'm using the word woman, I don't believe that definition that the average person hears what I'm saying is to be true. Because a woman could be an XY chromosome person who just didn't masculinize. Because if a person comes out looking female genital wise, why are they not female? That's a complex answer to that question, because the reality is that there are people who do have female body types that have their brain did get masculinized and they actually see themselves as men. So it's a very difficult answer, but it has a lot to do with genes and hormones. Anyway, so there's more pictures. This one here, some of these pictures are kind of like just before surgeries or for surgeries and stuff, but here's a person who before and after, and I'm going to scroll down here, before and after. Come on, there is that. Here it is. Before and after. You can Google this, just like I did. You can see before and after pictures, before and after pictures. But this happens in nature as well. It happens. It's the reality. Yes, we can obviously inject the hormones. We can obviously make it happen. But it actually happens in nature as well. Before, after. Here's another one that's before, after. Here's another one. Before, after. Before, after. Before, after. Before, after. So that's the first step, to realize before, after. To realize that hormones and genes do play a part, that it's a level of masculinization. That's the key factor in saying, hey, guess what? Maybe gender is a spectrum, and we do not live in this binary world that we think we live in. That we need to start redefining how we, define human beings, because there is more to it. And number two, how we treat human beings. It's just so unbelievable that we treat human beings the way we do. Look, just because a person doesn't fit in the binary system does not instantly make them a pervert. It doesn't instantly make them a bad person. It doesn't make them instantly be, all the stereotypes that people think of us. Creepy is another term that I hear. All kinds of things like that. It's like we're not. Matter of fact, I would dare say that most trans people or non-binary people even are really good, decent human beings who have been really mistreated by our world and misunderstood, and so I think it's time that we finally start really looking at the truth. Right now, like I said, I Googled this to find out about AI, and the AI answers were giving the old belief systems they were given. In other words, in the AI answer, none of this stuff should ever exist. And so I think somebody's feeding the data to control the narrative, which is sad. Because I went to college, I learned some of this stuff, and we're dismissing the reality of what's going on. And I experienced this myself personally, so I can tell you, I can vouch that this is real. Okay. Anyways, so there you go. There's the very beginning of the step of saying what is a woman, and I'm not done yet. Thank you for listening, and I hope you listen to the next video and come. I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.